As you will recall, Incoterms aim at preventing misunderstandings or complications between the main parties of a trade, the seller and the buyer, and in relation to the delivery of the sold goods. On September 10, 2019, the International Chamber of Commerce released the Incoterms 2020 edition. This e-learning presents only the differences between the 2010 and 2020 edition of the Incoterm rules, and it is not a standalone Incoterm training. It is also considered that you are already familiar with Incoterms. In terms of the Incoterm list itself, there is only a single change between both editions. The 2010 DAT delivered at terminal has become the 2020 DPU deliver place unloaded and is less restrictive in terms of unloading locations. Also, as it represents more responsibilities for the seller, it has been moved down the list. On this slide, you can see the 7 changes between the 2010 and 2020 edition. We will now proceed to review each of these 7 points individually. If you prefer the interactive version, choosing which points to review, you can head to our e-learning site indicated in the comments and use the 100% free interactive version of this Incoterm changes training. When delivering FCA, the seller's obligation and deliveries are completed prior to the loading of the cargo on the vessel. The buyer is the party responsible for the loading of the cargo on the vessel, and therefore is, by default, the party which will receive the onboard bill of lading from the ocean carrier. This can be a challenge for the seller, as this document is often the one required by a bank to prove that the seller has fulfilled his letter of credit's obligations in terms of delivery. In this case, the seller has to count on the buyer to provide him this document once he has received it from the carrier, hence defeating the purpose of the protection of a letter of credit. As you can see below, the Incoterm 2020 edition provides an additional option under FCA Article A6 and B6. The buyer can now, under this Incoterm, instruct his ocean carrier to provide the onboard bill of lading directly to the seller. The seller will then provide it to his bank, so as to use it to prove the delivery in the letter of credit, and then the buyer will receive it via the letter of credit logic through one or more banks. Please note that this onboard BOL, bill of lading, is required in letter of credit related trades, and that most trades do not call upon a letter of credit. Hence, this Incoterm documentary clause will not be commonly used. In the previous editions of the Incoterm rules, the indications related to cost and their allocations would appear for an Incoterm under the various articles to which they relate. Now, for ease of reference in the 2020 edition, the costs are also regrouped under an additional article, A9 for the seller and B9 for the buyer. They may still appear under the articles they concern, but a user can check out these articles 9s to see any cost-related item. You can see below an extract from the DAP Incoterm where all the costs have been grouped under the Article 9s. Some are highlighted to point out that they also appear in other articles. With the CIF and CIP Incoterm, the seller organizes the main carriage, but does not bear the risk associated, and in exchange must provide a cargo insurance in the name of the buyer for this main carriage. The obligations remain the same in the 2020 edition, but this time the minimum required coverage clauses have been upgraded for the multi-model CIP Incoterm. You can see here the article relating to insurance for the CIP and the CIF Incoterm, and you can note that CIP requires to comply with clauses of Category A of the Institute Cargo Clauses, whereas CIF asks only for compliance with Category C. In the 2010 edition, it was this Category C which was applicable for both Incoterms. This means that if you were to provide goods under the CIP Incoterm, the insurance you would have to provide would now be more inclusive and provide better coverage to the buyer. It will also be more costly, than the previous CIP insurance or than a CIF 2020 insurance. For example, cargo traveling under CIP Incoterm and its high coverage insurance would be protected against damage occurring from earthquakes, lightnings, or eruptions, and would also be covered if they were to be washed overboard. Whereas if this same cargo was moving under CIF Incoterm and a standard Clause C insurance, these two items would not have to be included in the insurance coverage. Previously, it appeared that any transport organized by the seller under an Incoterm would call upon the services of a third-party carrier, and he could not call upon his own means of transport, the rules mentioning only the making of contract of carriage. If a seller was to deliver using his own means of transport, the commonly used Incoterm was in fact ex works to this place of delivery. The 2020 Incoterms still of course mention the making of contract of carriage, meaning the usage of a third-party carrier, but also include mentions related to the arrangement of transport in general, understood as including the usage of the own means of transport. You can see here the extracts from the 2010 DAP and from the 2021. You can see that the 2010 one refers only to a contract of carriage, whereas the DAP 2020 includes also the general arranging terms, which can perfectly include the usage of the seller's own mean of transport, meaning that under DAP 2020, he could clearly, for example, use his own trucks to deliver cargo while still complying with the Incoterm rules. In the 2020 edition, the previous DAT, delivered at terminal Incoterm, has been renamed to DPU, delivered at place unloaded, and aims at providing more flexibility for the place of destination, the place of unloading, and not limiting it to a terminal. However, if the place of delivery is not a terminal, the seller is responsible for ensuring that the place where he delivers the cargo is suitable for its unloading. DPU is also placed after DAP, delivered at place, in the Incoterm list, as it includes more responsibility, namely the unloading of the cargo, on the seller's side. You can see here below the DAT delivery article from the 2010 edition versus the delivery article from the DPU 2020 edition. It is in the 2010 edition of the Incoterm rules that the first references to security arrangements and obligations made their appearance, typically under the articles A2b2 and A10b10 of certain Incoterms. Due to the continued and increased security concerns and their specific inclusion into the shipping practices, they also feature more significantly in the 2020 edition, notably in the articles A4, A7, and possibly A9 for the cost-related aspects. You can see here an extract from the DDP Incoterm 2020 edition and the new additional references to security-related items. The guidance notes, which were included at the beginning of each 2010 Incoterm, have been expanded to become more detailed and are now called explanatory notes for users. The notes aim to help a user understand in plainer English each Incoterm and help him select the appropriate one. You can see here below the FCA guidance notes from the 2000 edition and the much more detailed notes from the 2021. We have now reviewed the 7 changes, and to close out this training, we will look at a couple of Incoterm responsibility charts. On this slide, you can find the updated handover points to match the 2020 Incoterms. This slide shows the split of cost responsibilities between the buyer and the seller. Thank you for your attention during this update training. Congratulations, you should now be familiar with the changes between the 2010 and the 2020 edition. Once again, if you prefer, a more interactive version of this training is available on our e-learning catalog in which you can also find various other trainings, including a full Incoterm 2020 training. Thank you for your attention.